an informal basis. We're all civilized people here, and I hope each of us will respect the opinion of someone else. There's obviously diverse views here. I serve in a body where if you think you've got diverse views on this subject, you ought to sit where I sit during the week, because there's some people back there that don't think exactly the same way we do. We have different ideas. Nonetheless, we are civil to each other, and I think that's going to get us a long ways down the road in making a decision on this. My staff gave me notes as to what to say, and they said I should first of all extend a special thank you to Governor Otter for joining us. But as you can see, Governor Otter's not here today. I talked to him earlier, and he's got several meetings, and he is in essence weathered out because he has some meetings that he absolutely has to get to, and couldn't take the chance of being able to get in, or not get in, or not get out. So with that, we want to hear from people who have an interest in this, and let me start out right from the beginning and say that I don't know how to put this gently. There's a newspaper I don't particularly read all the time, but people tell me what's in it from time to time. And my position's been represented, I understand, up here publicly for some time, that I have said this or taken that position or what have you. And I want to assure you, eyeball to eyeball, I have not taken a position on this. I have no preconceived notions on this. I have not committed to anyone to do anything on this. Having said that, I'm also a human being, and like everybody else, when I look at an issue, things hit me that are part of my background, part of my culture, what have you. And this particular issue has been kicking around for a long time. I am not as deep in the details of this as a number of people are, that probably a lot of you that are sitting here, or the people that are sitting here. I will tell you this. My undergraduate degree is in forest management. Dale Bosworth and I were in the same class, although I'm quite a bit younger. In any event, when I look at a map that where either the Forest Service or BLM or whatever is trying to manage a piece of ground, or for that matter, it's my own ranch, as I look at it, if ground is blocked up, it is easier to manage than ground that isn't blocked up. And I don't think you don't have to have a PhD in forest management to look at checkerboard ground and realize what a challenge it is to manage these kinds of grounds. So having said that, when somebody says, well, I think we ought to try to block this up, I'm willing to listen. And that's what that's what got my attention on this to begin with. As long as this is blocked up, it's going to be an issue. Whether it gets resolved now, whether it gets resolved 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, it's going to continue to be an issue. I want to hear what you have to say, but we are on a bit of a short string here. And so we did limit it to 2 minutes. I can tell you, 2 minutes is not very long to speak. I get that. I understand that. But when we got to the end of Obamacare, which was a 3,000-page bill, stood this high, 2 people spoke, one for, one against, each got 2 minutes. Now, we all knew where we were, but nonetheless, in 2 minutes, you can give me exactly what's on your mind, I believe, in short order. I'll tell you what's going to move me. What's going to move me is facts. Hard facts. Science is going to move me. My training was in science. I understand science. With all due respect to my friends with the signs, they're not going to move me. The signs aren't going to move me. Emotion's not going to move me. Anger's not going to move me. But I really want to hear from you the facts that you have to tell me why this should be done or why this shouldn't be done. I'm really anxious to hear that. What we're going to do on that is we have a sign-up sheet, and we're going to ask you to come up in groups of 3. I think John, is that where you want people to sit here? We're going to have you come up in groups of 6, I guess. they're going to be in groups of 3, and we're going to have the ones that are ready to testify, and then the ones that aren't. I'm going to call your name. If you'll have the 3 of you that are the first ones sit here, and then when we're done with them, then I'll call another 3 to come up next row, and that way you're going to be able to get to speak. You're going to be able to get to the podium. Where's the podium? You're going to be up here. You can get up to the podium quickly, and that way we can hear from as many people as we can tonight. If you don't get a chance to speak tonight, I promise you, anything you write within reason, I'm going to read before I do anything with this. So even if you don't get a chance to speak, I want to hear from you in writings and emails, however you want to get in touch with me. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. And well, since Butch isn't here, it says it's got 5 minutes. Maybe his time to speak for another 5 minutes. I'll pass on that. We'll go to the first panel. And who we have is James Dolan, the principal of Western Pacific Timber, and he's accompanied by Andy Hawes, General Counsel of Western Pacific Timber, and Leanne Martin, a regional forester from the northern region, U.S. Forest Service. Let me tell you a couple other things I'm not particularly interested in, that's not going to move me on this, and that is Western Pacific Timber, as I understand it, was owned by a gentleman at one time, I don't know if it owned in whole or in part, Blickstaff, is that Blickstaff? However you pronounce it. And I understand he's a controversial person. I followed the soap opera in the paper that you have. And that, frankly, I don't care about that. There was an issue that was ongoing as to who actually owned Western Pacific Timber. It was a litigation. And while that was going on, I said, look, I didn't want to deal with this until that was cleared up and we knew exactly who, not we know who exactly, but there was somebody who could actually make decisions on the matter. So I'm not going to be moved by anything bad about him or what have you. We're interested in the land, the exchange, and that. So with that, Mr. Dolan, why don't you lead off? I'm not used to this public speaking thing. Commissioners, Skip Brandt, Jim Schmelik, and Mark Freer. Fry. I'm sorry. You guys, who's good? As one of you, have you elected a speaker? The chairman is going to speak. Jim, you're up.
And it's usually my name that gets said wrong. That felt good. Thank you, Senator Risch. The Commission would like to welcome everyone for being here tonight. We'd also like to give a special thanks to former Forest Chief Dale Bosworth for joining us, Western Pacific owner Jim Dolan, Regional Forester Leanne Martin, and Anthony Johnson, the Chairman of the Nespert Tribe, for joining us here tonight. We'd also like to say thank you for the other panel members who are here. Andy Hawes, who's representing Western Pacific, Ray Anderson, who's owner of Anderson Automotive, Blake Ballard, retired Forest Service from the Palouse Ranger District, and Sandra Mitchell of the Idaho Recreation Council. And thank you, Senator Risch, for stepping forward and showing us leadership on this issue, because this change will have real and substantial impacts on Idaho County. Again, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Idaho County is a rural county with 5.44 million acres. It has a taxable land base of less than 15% of these lands. Federally managed lands consist of 82%, or 4.46 million acres. Almost 2 million of these acres lie in the wilderness areas. Currently, because 82% of our taxable land base is held in trust by the federal government, the citizens of Idaho County are asked annually to support our schools with override levies that amount to approximately $3.4 million. Recently, the Commission signed off on 2 community block grants necessary to meet the standards providing for the health and safety and welfare of our county citizens. The stunning data in the grants applications were that within the population zones of these grant areas, 81% of the population of one and 54% of the population of the other were below the low or moderate income levels. Idaho County used to have one of the highest per capita incomes in the United States. Yet today we are dependents with respect to maintaining our quality of life and meeting the health, safety, and welfare needs for our county residents. The exchange process started before any of us were in office. The Commission objected to the original trade because it would severely undermine our taxable land base, jeopardizing over $100,000 in revenue to fund schools and county government. As the elected body representing the citizens of Idaho, we proposed an acre-for-acre exchange in Idaho County. We worked with the Forest Service to come up with a map, which we did, which contained over 50,000 acres that passed the NEPA. What you see before you today is those acres that passed NEPA. What we're looking at here is the loss of over $100,000. $39,000 goes to our primary school district right here in Grangeville. The Upper Lochsa land represents 1/5 of our private timber acres. These acres represent a substantial portion of our private timber base. Is it in the interest of Idaho County to forego any more of our taxable land base and cede more lands to the federal government, or should we seek proactive solutions that benefit the citizens of Idaho County? If the private acres are nationalized via outright purchase by the federal government or purchased by companies or environmental organizations like TNC and then deeded to the federal government like it was done across the Montana border, this is truly a loss to the citizens of Idaho County. Some try to point out that Idaho County would be more ahead by keeping our hand out for the federal payments. Sadly, the PILT payments that would come from this type of a purchase only amount to $12 million, and that's if those PILT payments continue to come in, and they get cut every year. If the trade goes through, we have the opportunity to keep approximately $60,000 in our tax-based revenues to produce jobs for Idaho County residents. Western Pacific Timber has been very cooperative to work with. They have been willing to entertain most anything we have asked them to do. At the end of the day, Idaho County cannot afford to lose a substantial portion of its private taxable land base. We are dedicated to make something work that will protect our tax base, our jobs, our private lands, and keep Idaho County whole. Again, thank you, Senator Risch, for showing leadership on this and putting this meeting together.
Jim, thank you. And I want to again thank both you and Skip and Mark for engagement in this and for putting this together and helping us with this. And, as you know, I look closely and listen carefully to what the local elected officials feel on a particular issue, particularly when it's as close to this as close to the county as this is. So with that, Jim, I guess you're up.
Thank you, Senator. Good evening, Senator Risch, Commissioners Schmelik, Grant, and Fry. Thank you for holding this public hearing tonight. I'm Jim Dolan, President of Western Pacific, and I'm here tonight with Andy Hawes, our General Counsel. Western Pacific is a forest land company with operations in Idaho and Washington State. For over 2 decades, we've tried to be a good neighbor to these communities, managing our forest lands sustainably, providing timber to local mills, and keeping our lands open for hunting, fishing, and other recreational activities. The path that leads us here tonight started 10 years ago. It was back in November of '05 after we acquired lands from Plum Creek in the Upper Lochsa. We realized they had ecological and historical value. In running this company the last few years, I've tried to understand and respect the people of Idaho, their love of the outdoors, their passion for recreation and open space. Personally, I'm an avid historian, and one of my favorite books is Undaunted Courage, Amrose's story of the journey of Lewis and Clark. I traced them from Pittsburgh to Three Forks of the Missouri, over Lolo Pass to Camp 13, a site vividly described by Lewis in his tale, and it is the Lily Lakes in Section 5 of this Lochsa property we're talking about tonight. That we came to own this is a historical accident from the railroad land grants, and I came to understand the significance of these holdings. I believe these lands should be owned and should be protected by part of our national heritage. So in the fall of '06, Western Pacific and the Forest Service undertook a process to try to develop an administrative land exchange with the goal of putting these lands into federal ownership. 4 years of work brought us 2 EIS statements, a supplemental EIS statement following the first one, and 24 months of collected comments and input from interested parties. Those comments were factored into an outline of the administrative exchange that we worked with the Forest Service. Yet by the middle of 2012, it was apparent that that administrative exchange could not solve some of the key issues that had been identified in the comments. Specifically, too much of the Forest Service land available in that exchange was not in Idaho County, and that would hurt Idaho County's tax base. The Nez Perce tribal rights could not be, treaty rights could not be guaranteed in an administrative exchange. Continued public recreational use of the lands that would be coming from the federal government to us could not be guaranteed. And special uses such as grazing and guiding on these lands could not be guaranteed in an administrative exchange. Not surprisingly, these problems created considerable and understandable local opposition to this exchange. These problems led the delegation to issue a letter in September of 13 asking the Forest Service to suspend the administrative exchange. The reasoning was that it was unlikely that we could reach a conclusion that balanced federal and local interests. And the congressional delegation felt that the interests would best be reconciled by the authority and protections that could be embodied in the legislative enactment by the U.S. Congress. So at September 13, the Forest Service stood down on the proposed administrative exchange. We were asked to go meet with stakeholder groups and develop an idea of a legislative enactment. So we have met with ranchers, grazers, recreational users, hunters, county commissioners, the Nez Perce tribe, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, numerous other stakeholders in an attempt to resolve and mitigate the concerns we heard to move this forward. We took the liberty then of creating a draft legislative proposal that we circulated to the delegation, to the county government, and to the local newspapers for comment. We've been willing over the last year to hear comments, highlight the problems, and make suggested changes. In our view, the legislation does 4 important things that we didn't think could be accomplished by the administrative proposal. First, it makes more Forest Service acreage available in Idaho County, thereby addressing the Commissioner's concern about the tax base. And it eliminates land in any other county other than Idaho County. Second, the legislation assures off-reservation treaty rights for the Nez Perce tribe. Third, the legislation assures continued special use permits for grazing and guiding on Forest Service lands that we would acquire. And finally, through access easements that are part of the legislation, which will be held in perpetuity by the Idaho County government, it provides for continued access for hunting and other recreational uses for the local community. We're not so presumptuous to believe that we've addressed all the concerns that could be raised, but we've actively sought out, listened to, and in good faith tried to develop this legislation. As private citizens, we've taken this process as far as we can. It's now time for the delegation, the governor, the county commissioners to determine if this proposed legislation can move forward. We believe it's in the common good of all Americans to protect these important historical lands, especially the light rules and park trail. And I'm supposed to wrap it up? Okay. And in the interest of people of Idaho. There's still other views. Some have said they should buy our land. There's never been a appropriation of money to do that in the last 10 years. And importantly, it doesn't address the tax base, the Nez Perce interest, or the rights to use the land. These were must be heard from the people to put this legislation in. Change always brings challenges, but something has to happen here, because without some clarity, we cannot continue to just hold these lands. My hope tonight is that we get a clear sense of the positives moving forward, and I can see that everyone here tonight will not get exactly what they want. But I hope we get an understanding whether the United States is prepared to move forward on this legislation. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator, for the invite to speak here tonight. So, and part of it I'll dovetail a little bit and save a little bit of time here from Mr. Dolan went through with some of the history. But the Forest Service has been exploring a land exchange due to the significant resource values in this part of the country and the headwaters of the Lochsa River, such as the fisheries habitat, elk habitat, segments of historical and culturally important trails, and many of the other resources that are available throughout the headwaters of the Lochsa. We recognize many of the restoration needs on the private land as well as the Forest Service land, and that it's important to consider these resource values and management challenges that would be likely to change with or without an exchange. We know the issues associated with this proposed land exchange evoke strong and varied opinions, and they have in the past, and they continue to invoke those opinions and emotions. And we acknowledge those as we've been working through this in the history of this exchange. As Mr. Dolan pointed out, in response to a lot of those values and the emotions and the opinions, the Idaho delegation asked the agency to put on hold and pause the administrative land exchange back in 2013. And we've done so and haven't done anything through the administrative process since that time. We're learning about this proposal, as the rest of you are, from the Western Pacific Timber Company, and some of the details of it, as Mr. Dolan has pointed out. And although we don't weigh in on the legislative proposal or have an official position on a legislative proposal, we are anxious to work with you, and we have personnel available to work through the process, and very important for us to be here tonight, and I'm really privileged to be here tonight to listen to the various opinions and to the different perspectives on this exchange. From our perspective, as we move forward, one of the things that we feel need to be considered include but are not limited to such things as honoring the treaty rights and the government-to-government relationship with the Nez Perce tribe, the local economic and social impacts such as to the counties, the ecological and conservation values, the potential land management needs and challenges, including managing the wildfire risk and response, and continuing to have a transparent and collaborative process throughout. So the Forest Service is here. We are providing information. We're available to help out however we can, and we look forward to continuing to participate in this process and to listening to all the folks here and in the future. So thank you again for the invite. Appreciate the opportunity and look forward to the rest of the evening.
And let me ask a question. And if you can't answer this, I don't want to put you on the spot, but prior to us being involved, and I think Mr. Nolan probably laid out the reasons why the delegation said, you know, this probably isn't a good deal going forward with the administrative change. I was particularly concerned about tribal rights. I know that the others were also, and that was a non-starter for us to try to go forward without recognizing tribal rights and the other items, obviously, Mr. Dolan mentioned. But when the Forest Service was proceeding with this before the delegation asked them to stop, so I know you're saying right now you don't have a position on this, but is it fair to say you did at one time, and now you don't have to, so you're here to kind of help if need be? But how has that changed? I guess is the question.
A very good question. I'm happy to try and answer that. From the standpoint of the Forest Service did enter into and was pursuing this land exchange, and from an administrative position, yes, we were in favor of it. There were a lot of challenges with it, and that's where from the administrative processes and the sideboard that we are guided by through the laws and regulations, as you're aware of, there were certain things and some of those challenges that we administratively could not figure out how to work through, and that's where, from a legislative perspective, there could be some opportunities there to work through some of those. So when I say we don't have a position, it's because, as you know, on legislation, until the administration comes out, we have no official position. But there's many things about this that, yes, definitely we are in favor of, for all the reasons that we were previously from the resource standpoint, but we acknowledge there's still some challenges and some concerns out there that need to be worked through.
There are challenges. Thank you, Liam. Appreciate that. Sandra?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for inviting me to this party.
Glad to have you.
Many people choose to live in Grangeville.
Sandra, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And same with everybody here.
My name is Sandra Mitchell.
When you get the opportunity, go.
I'm the Executive Director of the Idaho Recreation Council, and I'm also Public Lands Director for the Idaho State Snowmobile Association. And I am from North Idaho originally. I was in Lewiston and worked in Idaho County for many, many years, so I truly understand and love this county. Many people choose to live in Grangeville, the Grangeville area, not because of the high wages, but because they have access to some of the most incredible public lands in Idaho. The lands proposed to be exchanged definitely fall into that category. One gentleman, a fifth-generation Idaho County resident, spends at least 47 weekends a year combing these mountains. They know this land. It is a precious commodity, so it's not surprising that there is great concern and apprehension over the proposed exchange. At the heart of the concern from the recreation community is quite simply a lack of trust. Trust does not come easily to people who have watched many of the promises of past legislative processes not kept. Meadow Creek is a classic example. Part of the agreement when the River of No Return Wilderness was passed, that it was to be open for logging. That hasn't happened. Or how about the Hells Canyon Visitor Center that was to be built in Riggins? Or the road in the Gospel that was to be left open? Promises made and promises not kept. As little trust as there is for the Forest Service, there is less trust for the exchange and the threat that these lands could be sold, developed, or closed to the public. No one is blind to the fact that every time there is a Forest Service planning process, access for the motorized community is reduced. The fault is not with the Forest Service, but rather with an abundance of federal laws under which they must operate. However, many believe that at least with the Forest Service, there is an opportunity to participate in the decision-making, to object, and to litigate if necessary. The concept proposed by Western Pacific Timber is completely new and not completely understood. Quite simply, because I don't believe it has ever been tried before in this manner. The uncertainty leads to more distrust. Last week, I met with a number of recreationists, and I have compiled a list of their concerns. 1, dissatisfaction with the U.S. Forest Service Idaho County process on choosing which lands were eligible to be traded. 2, confusion about the easement concept. 3, loss of access. 4, inability to enforce or manage the lands after the transfer. 5, sale of the lands after the logging was completed. 6, impacts to wildlife. 7, support for logging the land, but not for changing the ownership. And 8, maintenance of the roads and trails. It would be ideal if there was complete agreement on a plan that would provide timber to the mills, increase taxes to the county, and protect access. At this point, the recreation community cannot agree with this proposal. Thank you.
I hope that doesn't come off of my time.
No, that's not going to come off of your time, Mr. Ballard. Let me ask Sandra a question. As long as she volunteered to come here, more or less. Sandra, you know, in working past issues with you, I've been impressed with the open-mindedness with which you approach these things. I noticed the very first item you had on your list was probably not going to phrase this exactly right, but the first item you had on your list was the land that's been chosen to swap with the federal government. Is that the first? Is that the biggest issue that people your group is wrestling with?
Thank you, Senator. I would say it's a big issue, but I don't think it's the biggest issue. I truly, after having met with these folks again, I mean, we've met many times in the past, but just once since this kicked off again, I would say it is the fear of the change, that it would change in a way that it would look good today, but in 10 years from now, it would fall apart and they wouldn't be able to keep their trails open, they wouldn't be able to pay for it, and they wouldn't be able to enforce anything. So I think that's probably the greatest fear, but they were concerned about how the acres were chosen.
Right, I get that. So that leads to the question I was actually getting to, and that is, do you think that a different approach to this, that is a different subset of lands, a different process of choosing the lands to be chosen, do you think that is a possible cure for the opposition?
Senator, I think that for a number of folks, that definitely would be an improvement if it were not those particular acres. However, I think there are a number of folks also, they're not part of the recreation community, who just would object to any exchange. But for the recreational community, these acres, that concerned them greatly, yes, sir.
Thank you for your candor. Mr. Ballard, I'm sorry, your time's up. Senator talked way too much.
Maybe it's because I'm represented as being with the Friends of the Blue Ranger District. We are allies, but I represent retired Forest Service employees. My name is Blake Ballard. I'm a Forest Service retiree with 38 years of service on 5 ranger districts and 4 national forests. I spent over 20 years in the Bruce District, where, among other duties, I was the District Land Exchange Coordinator. I am not anti-land exchange in general. I am not, repeat, not a disgruntled former Forest Service employee. I represent a number of retired Forest Service employees from across the nation, from the Chief's office to the Ranger District level. We signed a letter to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources on February 10, 2014, opposing the Upper Lochsa land exchange and the abrupt dropping of the Forest Service administrative study in favor of legislative intervention. The reasons we oppose the exchange are quite simple. The Forest Service could not make a case for the exchange. In 2 draft environmental impact statements, no biological, social, environmental, managerial, or economic problems were disclosed that would be fixed by land exchange. The exchange is not in the public interest, contrary to what the draft environmental impact statement says. The public is overwhelmingly opposed to the exchange, as evidenced by public response to the draft environmental impact statement. So why are we here tonight? We are here tonight because after the Forest Service's 5.5-year administrative study clearly failed to justify an exchange and was overwhelmingly opposed by the public, they abruptly bailed out of the administrative process and, in an apparent end run, asked the Idaho congressional delegation to step in. The administrative process was stopped without disclosing the finding of 2 draft environmental impact statements, or addressing or even disclosing the comments received from the public. We question the ethics of the Forest Service asking the delegation to intervene in a process specifically put in place by Congress to ensure this kind of abuse of the public trust doesn't happen. We believe the Forest Service should explain to the public why the agency gave up on the administrative process, why they failed to respond to the public comments submitted on the exchange. In closing, let me summarize. The Forest Service blew its big chance to justify the exchange. No problems were identified that would be solved by land exchange. Number 2, the general public does not support an exchange. The administrative process, this is number 3, the administrative process was working as intended by Congress, but was not going the Forest Service way, so they abruptly dropped the study and asked for legislative intervention. Number 4, when the Forest Service study did not make a case for the exchange, they should have selected the no action alternative, issued a final environmental impact statement with public comments disclosed and case closed. The Forest Service should have considered other alternatives suggested by the public during the administrative study. Number 1, purchase the lands through outside funding such as Land and Water Conservation Fund. Number 2, consolidate within the Upper Lochsa checkerboard lands. When former Forest Supervisor Tom Riley was questioned by Forest Service retirees about the urgency of the exchange, he said, "The Forest Service chief told me to make it happen." Clearly, the Forest Service had already decided that the land exchange was going to take place. Riley had his marching orders to make it happen. Later, new Forest Supervisor Rick Brazel was asked about the chief's Make It Happen order. Supervisor Brazel tried to explain what she meant was make the system, the administrative study process happen, make the NEPA process work. Senator Risch, legislative intervention, whether requested by the Forest Service or the congressional delegation, is not an example of making the system work. We hereby request, Senator Risch, that you direct the Forest Service to finish the analysis and issue a final environmental impact statement, including a summary of the public input. Many of my statements are in contradiction with some of the statements previously made, and I stand by my statements, and they are supported in my written comments that I will submit to you. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, you're up.
Thank you. I'm Ray Anderson. I own a aircraft engine shop in Grangeville, and I want to thank you guys, Senator Risch and Mike Hanna, for inviting me here to talk. This is very important, and I'd like to thank everybody else for being here and working on this.
Still good. Hey, nice catch, Ted.
I'd like to run a timeline on our local involvement with the
Don't leave,
Lochsa
Ted.
land exchange. Some of these dates are approximate, best I can remember. September 2011, I was approached by several friends living in the Cove Road area. They received a letter from the Forest Service. The letter had maps attached showing that large sections of our local forest land were scheduled to be turned into private property. A meeting was planned at the courthouse for the affected cattle grazers only. The public was not invited, but about 100 of us showed up anyway. It was pretty obvious we were not wanted there. County commissioners told us it was a done deal, we can't stop it. Well, we did. At least we slowed it down. We then organized public meetings at the senior center. All were invited, many spoke. Most indicated strong opposition to the Lochsa land exchange. We wrote letters to the Forest Service showing approximately 90% were against it. The county commissioners organized a Lochsa land exchange task force of 16 various Idaho County residents. We met about 10 times between November 2011 and January 2012, and an overwhelming majority it was decided there should be no land exchange. And if there had to be a land exchange, it should happen in the upper Lochsa only by blocking the checkerboard, making it half private and half Forest Service. Conservation easements were brought up during the task force meetings. It was generally agreed upon easement funding and enforcement would be too complicated and not practical. Most of our findings were pretty much ignored by the county commissioners. After the task force, things got pretty quiet until the possibilities of congressional action were brought up. In other words, we know you people don't want the land exchange, so we're changing the laws so you have to have a land exchange anyway. Well, we're going to keep fighting this. We don't care how long it takes to stop it. It's wrong, and it will be stopped. Western Pacific are not really our friends here. They're not trying to help us. They want to make tens of millions of dollars off our public lands. They tell us they're a timber company, not a real estate company. But if you look on Google, right now they're selling 2 parcels in Klickitat County, Washington, 289 acres and 431 acres for $520,000 and $775,000, both zoned for 5-acre home sites. Western Pacific has spent over $300,000 in the last 3 years on lobbying to try to push this through. The land above Grangeville in the Cove is something we all use for hunting, firewood cutting, berry picking, mushroom hunting, and just being out in the woods. Some of this exchange property on the Grangeville Salmon Road between mile markers 8 and 16 to the east does not have a lot of timber, but it will make pretty desirable real estate development. If we don't stop this, we'll have fences, gates, and no trespassing signs all the way to Whitebird Station. Then these guys, they don't want us to organize, they don't want us to come together on this stuff, but we have to ignore that some of us are Democrats, some are Republicans. We all have to work together to stop this, guys. So to sum things up, promises of conservation easements in perpetuity, unlimited recreational access, and nothing will change. It's all just lipstick on the same old pig. And who's against this? Are we against this?
Yeah.
Against it!
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Dale, I was listening carefully to the remarks from Mr. Ballard, and he indicated that there's no reason to do this exchange as there are no benefits. To me, that's a legitimate argument, if indeed there are no benefits. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, I will speak to that, because I have a little bit different opinion on this, but let me just kind of go through here, because that's part of what I want to say. First, I want to thank you for convening this meeting and giving me an opportunity to be here to speak. I think this is a hugely important issue, and frankly, I am really happy that so many people are so concerned about it, because that means that they really, really care about the National Forest lands. I'm in a little bit different position, in my view, than some of these folks are, but it's good that people care about these national forests. You know, throughout my career in the Forest Service, I had the pleasure of being able to work in some of what I think are America's most beautiful wild lands. And I served Idaho as a regional forester for the National Forest in the southern part of the state, and then I moved to the northern part, and I was a regional forester for the northern half of Idaho. And I think I might be the only person that ever had that pleasure, and it's a good thing. And then I became chief of the Forest Service, so I still had an opportunity to deal with Idaho, the state that I care so much about. But now I'm enjoying the opportunity of being retired and using the National Forest as a private citizen and as a Forest Service retiree. I spent a few years as a district ranger on the Powell Ranger District in Upper Lochsa back in the 1970s, and my memories are very vivid today about that area. Let me just tell a little bit of a story. Shortly after I became chief, I was talking to a group of people in the southeastern part of the United States, a couple hundred people, Forest Service employees and some members of the public. And somebody asked me, what's your favorite place, favorite national forest, favorite place in the whole national forest system? Now, if I had been politically correct, I would have said, oh, they all have their wonderful, unique places and opportunities, and they're all really good. No, I just blurted out that it's the Upper Lochsa, the Powell Ranger District, Clearwater National Forest, Northern Idaho, that's my favorite place. And the whole audience went completely silent. They did not think I would say that. And later on, I'd go to different places and somebody would ask a question, they'd say, okay, other than the Upper Lochsa, what's your favorite place in the United States? And I'd say, well, they all have their very unique and important opportunities. I learned how to be a little more politically correct. But my first answer was my correct answer. I really care about the Upper Lochsa, and that's why I'm here. My memories are vivid partly because the Upper Lochsa region is such a spectacular place. I mean, both from an aesthetic, ecological, and historic resource. Wildlife, fisheries, anadromous fisheries, bull trout, recreation, water quality, timber management. All those things are there in that Upper Lochsa. The public and private checkerboard ownership of the Upper Lochsa, I think, is what I call a historic accident that continues to jeopardize the proper management of this unique resource. If the private land component gets divided up and developed more than it is right now, with one ownership basically now, if it gets divided and developed, resource management will become a nightmare. And I think a lot of these important resources that are there would be lost. It's in the headwaters of the Clearwater River. The Clearwater, therefore, that makes it the headwaters of the Snake River, the headwaters of the Columbia River. That's important because whatever happens in the headwaters has an effect all the way downstream. And so I think we should care about the upper Lochsa. If the private land is developed, I think forest managers in the future are going to have a very, very difficult time. The Forest Service manages for the greatest good, for the greatest number, for the long run. That's our job. That's their job, used to be my job. And I think the Forest Service is very capable of doing some restoration work and taking care of some of those lands up there in the Upper Lochsa that have been hit so hard over the years. Timber companies have a different purpose, and it's a good purpose and all, but it's not the same as the Forest Service's purpose. And I think that's important, especially when you're talking about the headwaters of our rivers. I strongly believe then, as a young ranger, that the interest of all Idahoans and all Americans, frankly, would be way better served if we could put the whole Upper Lochsa into federal ownership. And 40 years later, almost, I still believe that today. I've reviewed the draft land exchange proposal to put the Upper Lochsa into federal ownership. I believe that it makes some sense, and I think that it needs to go forward with maybe some changes to try to help satisfy some of the concerns. There's an equal value land exchange. Most of these lands would end up in have an easement on them. People who say that those easements won't be taken care of, I just don't agree with that. I think you can have an easement, and I think the people of Idaho County would demand that those easements would be enforced. So I think there are answers to these questions. As I said earlier, an exchange makes a lot of sense. Appropriate funds are not going to come to buy these lands, and so I think that's what we need to do. So you need to put me down as one retiree, Forest Service retiree, that is no longer on anyone's payroll, that I would be eager to see this project proceed, and I'd be ready to help any way that I can.
Thank you.
I knew it right now.
Let me give my speech again about how we're all going to be civil to each other. I understand that there's people feel strongly about this, and I understand there's different views. But I'm here to listen. I hope all of you are here to listen. Let's respectfully listen to each other's point of view. So with that, how about Anthony? Would you like to speak for the crowd, please? It's Anthony Johnson. He's chairman of the Nez Perce Tribe.
Good evening, everyone. As the Senator said, I'm Anthony Johnson. I'm presently serving as the chairman of the Nez Perce Tribe Executive Committee. I come here today to talk to you about an issue of very real importance to the Nez Perce Tribe, the Nez Perce people, and the Nez Perce way of life. And I could sit here and tell you about treaty reserved rights, the federal trust responsibility, and I'm sure many of you have heard it throughout your life. Many of you may have not agreed with that statement throughout your life. Many of you may not have agreed with the existence of the Nez Perce tribe throughout your life. And yet, through the course of time, we have become neighbors in a land that we call Idaho. And the reason why I approach it from the human perspective at this point is that in the protection of the Nez Perce way of life, we have been, the Nez Perce tribe, a benefit to the citizenry of Idaho, and specifically of the area that we call home, the area we all call home. The work that the Nez Perce tribe has done, whether you've agreed with it, and I'm going to use this example, the wolf recovery effort. Those of us who are avid hunters may not have agreed with that. And yet, when you look at the work that the Nez Perce tribe has done in fisheries restoration, we have restored the coho from extinction. We have brought the coho back to the Clearwater River. We have done amazing work in the restoration of the fall Chinook to the Clearwater River. We continue to work with the spring run of salmon. And we continue to work with our neighbors in areas of wildlife restoration, whether it be the Craig Mountain Agreement, the Door Shack Mitigation Agreement, that those are all examples of checkerboarded lands that are managed by a tribal entity, a state entity. Even in our very existence and living together, many have questioned the validity of the Nez Perce Reservation and questioned the validity of the Nez Perce tribe in that words that have been spoken like diminishment, checkerboarded reservation, and yet jurisdictionally we exist. We continue to exist. If we were to take a step back for a moment and say that this land exchange has been going on for 10 years, I would challenge that in those 10 years we have fished, we have hunted, we have gathered, we have done much in the areas that are proposed for exchange. And the reason why I say we is because when I look at the legislation as proposed, I become concerned. Not for me, I'll continue fighting, but think about a provision that says to provide for reasonable public access for hunting and fishing by Native American tribes and the general public. In that one statement, welcome to the club, you are in the same boat as me. I would caution you on some words that might say, if you hear, as long as the grass shall grow and water flow, become very concerned. Today, the rights of the Nez Perce tribe are as such that they are enjoined with the lives of the people that we call our neighbors, you people here. So I would say to you that in light of this agreement, there is much that is unknown. If we were to look at the website of Western Pacific, one statement in their recreational policy should concern you as it concerns me, that access to the lands is a privilege. The Nez Perce tribe fights many battles in protection of our treaty reserved rights. When we were fighting the dam breaching battle or the restoration of salmon, we were told that, yes, you do have that privilege, but a gentle reminder that privileges can be taken. So with that, if I were to provide a fact for the senator as he looks at facts in closing, I would say a paragraph from the impacts to the tribe. Over the last several years, the tribe has implemented $4.3 million in restoration projects on Forest Service lands in the Upper Lochsa, and the Forest Service invested nearly $3 million in the restoration area. Since 1992, about 267 miles of roads have been decommissioned and 9 culverts were removed on fish-bearing streams. So just a quick note on much of the work that the tribe does to maintain our way of life and Idaho's way of life. With that, I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here and be a voice that protects not only the Nez Perce tribe's future for 7 generations, but speak in behalf of the rights of all the citizens in this fine area that we call home. Katsiaya, Yoko Kolo. Thank you.
We're going to move now to comments